In this video, I'll be ranking almost every map in Dead by Daylight. I'll be dividing each map into one of three categories: survivor favored, balanced, and killer favored. Factors like palette spawns, window spawns, visibility, and map-specific structures will be taken into consideration when sorting each map. While these map rankings should give a general idea of which map favors which team, it's entirely possible for the opposite team to gain the advantage if certain killers or add-ons are used. So with that being said, let's begin. Our first map is Shelter Woods. It's a large and heavily forested map that offers a lot of cover for survivors. However, it also has long lines of sight and an open area in the center of the map, making it risky for survivors to cut through the middle. The terrain is almost entirely flat, making it impossible for survivors to gain a vantage point or use the balanced landing perk. Looping structures and generators mostly spawn around the outer ring of the map, which often results in survivors getting cornered by the killer. And once a survivor has been spotted, breaking line of sight with the killer is a challenge, since they can follow survivor movements through the gaps of the trees. While Shelter Woods is a decent map for hiding, once a survivor is found, its map layout tends to favor killer, so I'll be ranking it as a killer favored map. Next is Suffocation Pit. This is a relatively large map and contains a landmark known as the Mine. It features a guaranteed generator spawn, a few windows, and a few pallets outside that can make it a decent place to loop the killer. The map also contains a few jungle gyms in the center that survivors can use during their chases. Hills sometimes spawn on the far ends of the map that can give survivors a height advantage, but the generators on this map tend to be clustered together, often allowing the killer to utilize the triple generator strategy later in the game. While survivors have quite a few resources here, the generator locations on this map can single-handedly win games for the killer, so I'll consider it a balanced map. Next is Coal Tower. This map features a landmark known by the same name. It's a two-story building that always contains a window on the first floor and a generator on the second floor. Pallets can also be found around its walls. The rest of the map contains trees, broken walls, and the usual looping areas found on most maps. Aside from the Coal Tower's window and upper floor, there aren't any game-breaking loops on this map. It's also relatively small, which allows killers to patrol generators quickly. Overall, I think Coal Tower is a fairly balanced map. Next is Blood Lodge. This map has high visibility and a signature structure known as the Cabin. It features a possible generator spawn on the porch, a balcony with a potential chest spawn, and a window on the lower floor. Apart from the cabin, the map is mostly made up of debris that can be easily seen over by killers and survivors. However, the lack of line of sight blockers tends to favor survivors more, since it eliminates the uncertainty about the killer's location and lets survivors make better decisions. The numerous pallets in the center of the map also lessen the chance that survivors will be punished if they get caught out. The many pallets and ability to see the killer at almost all times makes Blood Lodge seem like a survivor-sided map to me. Next is Gas Heaven. This map's main structure is the gas station, which sits near the center of the map and always contains a generator, windows, and a chest. It also provides a large amount of cover, making it a fairly safe area for survivors. Outside of the gas station are a few short debris loops, and the potential to spawn either a claw machine or bus near the center of the map. Scattered along the outer edges of the map are the usual looping structures. The map also contains long car piles that generators often spawn behind, which tend to favor survivors since they block line of sight and force the killer to go around them to patrol. Overall, Gas Heaven strikes me as a survivor-sided map, but more balanced than Blood Lodge. Next is AZAROV'S resting place. This map's landmark is the office, which lies at the far end of the map. It contains 3 windows, a potential chest spawn, and a potential basement spawn. Outside the office, players will find 3 generators on the same side of the map, 3 generators on the opposite side, and 1 generator in the center. This layout is the deciding factor for which team will have the advantage. Initially, the map tends to favor killer, as they can simply focus on guarding one side of the map and utilize the triple generator strategy later in the game. However, if survivors manage to finish just 1 generator on each side, they'll become evenly divided and make patrolling all of them nearly impossible for the killer. So given that there's potential for either team to gain the advantage, I'll be ranking AZAROV'S resting place as a balanced map. Next is the Disturbed Ward. This map is relatively large and has its generators spread out widely, making it difficult to patrol for most killers. Its main structure is the Asylum, which features 2 floors with numerous pallets, windows, and lockers on each, essentially making it a safe haven for survivors. Outside the building is a mix of open fields, debris loops, and broken walls, which aren't as safe for survivors. However, experienced survivors will understand this, and typically run to the Asylum to make use of its strong loops and hiding spots. Given how much of an advantage the Asylum offers survivors, I'll be ranking it as a survivor-favored map. Next is Father Campbell's Chapel. This map is relatively small, and has most of its generators spawned near its center, making them easier for killers to patrol than most maps. Its main structure is the chapel, which features a generator on its second floor, and numerous windows on both floors. Similar to the Asylum, the chapel offers a great advantage to survivors with the shelter it provides, the height advantage of the second floor, and the loops it enables. It isn't as large as the Asylum, however, so killers should have an easier time dealing with it. Outside of the chapel is a mix of debris loops, trees, and broken walls, most of which are pretty standard. Aside from the map's main structure, killers should find most loops to be manageable. Overall, Campbell's Chapel feels pretty balanced. Next is Grim Pantry. This map is fairly large and features 2 unique structures, the pantry and the cursed cabin. A generator will always spawn on top of the pantry, and potentially spawn in the cabin. There's also a pier that spawns in the corner of the map that often contains 1 or even 2 generators. The height advantage and pallets these buildings offer usually makes completing their generators easy, as survivors will be able to both see the killer approaching, and run to a pallet if they get caught by surprise. Aside from these structures, the usual loops can be found scattered across the map. There are also open areas that contain foliage and debris for survivors to hide in. Given how many buildings there are that grant survivors a height advantage, I'll be ranking Grim Pantry as a survivor-favored map. Next is the Pale Rose. Similar to Grim Pantry, this map is pretty large and features 2 unique structures, the Pale Rose and the Small Boat. The Rose always contains a generator, and potentially a totem, and a chest in the wheelhouse. There's also a pier that spawns in the middle of the map that always contains a generator. These structures give survivors numerous vantage points from which they can locate and evade the killer. They also have a number of pallets and windows that make them safe areas to run during a chase. Aside from these buildings, the map features a large open area in its center with a sparse number of loops scattered around it. Even if survivors get caught in the open area of the map, however, they still have the map's main structures within a short distance. So for the same reasons as Grim Pantry, I'll be ranking the Pale Rose as a survivor-favored map. Next is Mount Ormond. This is a medium-sized map and features a landmark known as the Ormond Ski Resort, a 2-story building that's often considered a safe haven for survivors thanks to its many windows, pallets, and height advantages it offers. The resort always contains a generator and often contains a chest. Outside the building are the usual survivor loops, but also piles of snow and rocks survivors can use as cover. However, a big advantage killers have in this map is its high visibility. Killers will find that Ormond's snowy landscape, long sight lines, and lack of tall grass makes it easy to spot survivors. And after injuring a survivor, the snowy terrain makes bloodstains very obvious. Since both killers and survivors have distinct advantages on this map, I'll be ranking it as balanced. Next is the Treatment Theater. This is the smallest map in the game, which gives killers a great advantage in the form of shorter patrol routes. It also has short lines of sight, which makes it difficult for survivors to determine the direction killers are coming from. The theater's maze-like layout also makes locating generators and totems a challenge sometimes. However, this also allows survivors to easily break line of sight with the killer, thanks to all the rooms and hallways available. This can sometimes work against them though. Many of Treatment Theater's rooms look similar, which can make it hard for survivors to remember where the windows are and what pallets have been broken. And similar to Mount Ormond, the white floors and lack of foliage makes tracking blood and scratch marks easy. Killers seem to have the edge on this map, so I'll be ranking it as killer favored. Next is LAMPKIN Lane. This map is relatively large, and its main structure is the Myers house, which contains one of the most overpowered loops in the game if survivors have the balanced landing perk. Additionally, this house, as well as most of the buildings on LAMPKIN Lane, have balconies survivors can use as vantage points against the killer. Most of the map's generators spawn inside these houses, which all contain stairs survivors can run for when they hear the heartbeat. Apart from these buildings, the map is filled with line-of-sight blockers like fences and hedges, which makes it easy for survivors to hide. It's also a nighttime map, which allows survivors with the proper clothing to hide more effectively. There is one map advantage killers have though, and that's how the basement always spawns in the center, which can result in more basement hooks. Survivors seem to have the majority of advantages on this map, so I'll be ranking it as survivor favored. Next is BADHAM Preschool. This map is relatively small and features the preschool as its landmark. This structure always contains a generator, pallets on its upper and lower floors, and a fence near its entrance that makes it great for looping. Apart from the school are a few buildings, which often contain generators. Unlike the houses on LAMPKIN Lane, however, these don't have balconies, which makes them more balanced. Outside of BADHAM's structures, the map is a mix of open fields and debris. The streets offer long sight lines that allow killers to spot survivors easily. Scattered throughout the streets are cinder blocks, tire piles, and bushes survivors can use as cover. The usual loops can be found here and there, and while there are a couple safe pallets on this map, the rest are manageable. Overall, BADHAM seems like a fairly balanced map. Next is the Underground Complex. This map is relatively small, making it easy to patrol for most killers. It features a signature area known as the Rift Room, which always contains a generator. The complex consists of many intersecting corridors that shorten players' lines of sight, which often makes it difficult to determine which direction the killer is coming from. Its floors are primarily gray and white, with no foliage to obscure scratch marks or blood trails, which makes it easy to track survivors. However, the laboratory also features many pallets, windows, and catwalks survivors can use to loop or hide from the killer. While there is an abundance of escape tools for survivors on this map, most of them are unsafe, and can be ignored in most cases. Since killers seem to have the majority of advantages here, I'll be ranking it as a killer-favored map. Next is the Yamauka Estate. This map is medium-sized, and its landmark is the Yamauka House. This structure always contains a generator, as well as several windows that make it a decent looping location. Outside of the house is a large garden, populated densely by tall grass, trees, and boulders, which serve as great hiding spots for survivors. There are also a few hills and shrines that can give survivors a height advantage. While the loops on Yamauka Estate are pretty standard, chases in general seem more difficult on this map. Dark patches of grass can hide blood trails and scratch marks, and the garden's numerous bushes often obscure the killer's view, making it easier for them to lose survivors. Given how many advantages the Yamauka Estate's garden grants survivors, I'll be ranking this map as survivor favored. Next is the game. This map is one of the smallest in Dead by Daylight, allowing most generators to be patrolled quickly by the killer. The map consists of 2 floors stacked directly on top of each other, which make it difficult for survivors to determine which floor the killer is on and which direction they're coming from. The game shares a lot of similarities with Treatment Theater. It has short lines of sight that make it easy to sneak up on survivors. Its rooms look similar and are arranged in a maze-like fashion, which make it difficult to find totems and generators. And the floors are primarily white and gray with no foliage, so blood and scratch marks are easy to follow. However, almost every pallet on this map is a safe pallet that most killers will have to spend a lot of time to get rid of. There are also windows like these that are pretty safe as well. Experienced survivors will be able to loop killers on the game for a long time, but overall, the advantages killers have outnumber the survivors. Next is Temple of Purgation. This is a large map and features a landmark known as the Temple. It's a 3-floor building that always contains a generator on its lower level. The temple offers survivors a multitude of windows, pallets, and high ground to help loop and hide from the killer. Outside the temple, the map is brightly lit and has long sight lines that can make spotting survivors easy. However, there are numerous loops all over the map, some of which are strong while others are weak. Regardless of what kind of loop it is, most of them surround the temple, which survivors can use to migrate from one loop to another. Given how great an advantage this map's landmark grants the survivor team, I'll be ranking it as survivor favored. Next is Mother's Dwelling. This is the largest map in Dead by Daylight, which makes patrolling generators more time consuming than most maps. It features 2 unique landmarks, the hunting cabin and the smokehouse. The cabin is a 2-story building that always contains a generator on its 2nd floor. It also has a number of pallets and windows that make it a popular area to loop the killer. The smokehouse is also a two-story building, but much smaller than the cabin. It always contains a window on its upper and lower floors, which gives it some looping potential. Outside of these structures, the map features high visibility and loops scattered around its landmark. Foliage and trees can provide cover for survivors and their tracks. And hills frequently spawn on this map, which grant survivors numerous vantage points when including the cabin and the smokehouse. Given how large the map is and how easy it is for survivors to obtain high ground, I'll be ranking Mother's Dwelling as survivor favored. Next is Torment Creek. This is a relatively large map and features a landmark known as the silo. A generator and window will always spawn in this structure, as well as a few pallets around it. The window of this structure is especially strong and will often guarantee a survivor can make it to another loop before the killer can catch them. Aside from this building, the map contains a few cornfields, hills, familiar looping areas, and machines like the harvester. Visibility is somewhat obscured by hay bales, trees, and corn, which tends to favor survivors more than killers, thanks to their third-person camera angles. While there isn't anything too game-breaking about Torment Creek, the map generally favors survivors thanks to its size, cornfields, and the main structure's windows and pallets. Next is the Thompson House. Like most Colvin farm maps, this one is large and features the farmhouse as its landmark. It's a two-story building that always contains a generator on its upper floor. This generator is often considered a freebie for survivors due to how long it takes the killer to patrol. However, there's only one entrance to the upper floor, so it's pretty difficult to avoid getting hit if the killer does choose to patrol it. Outside the farmhouse are a couple pallets that are relatively safe. There's also a massive cornfield that survivors can use to traverse the map without being seen, although the killer can use the harvester or farmhouse entrance to see over the field. Overall, the map favors survivors thanks to its size, cornfields, and the free generator in the farmhouse. And our last map is Rancid Abattoir. This is the smallest of the Coldwind farm maps, and features a slaughterhouse as its main structure. A generator will always spawn inside this building, as well as several windows. One of these windows spawns is especially powerful, and is often taken advantage of by survivors due to how safe it is. Near the entrances to the slaughterhouse are a few pallet spawns that can usually be mind-gamed. The rest of the map is filled with the usual cornfields, and common loops found in the Coldwind farm realm. A harvester will also always spawn on this map. Depending on which window spawns in the slaughterhouse, this could be a balanced or survivor-favored map, but a 50% chance is quite favorable for survivors, so I'll consider it a survivor-sided map. And that is the last map for this tier list. Keep in mind when looking at these rankings that some killers will perform better on some maps than others, and could flip a survivor-favored map into a killer-favored one. But anyways, thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, make sure to subscribe for future content.